This is a commission that ended up going a little off the rails. Last year, a client reached out to me wanting a colored pencil guitar with a herringbone pattern, which is far more complex than anything I've done in the past. So before starting, I tested it, and the results were not great. And at that point, I figured I probably couldn't pull it off, but later in this video, I do actually attempt a full herringbone version. There's just a lot that happens before that, and I've got over 150 hours into this project, probably more than any commission I've done in the past. And a big reason for that is I ended up building two completely different guitars for this project. Both are color pencil builds, just two very different approaches. And in this video, I'll show how I made both and why I had to. For this first guitar, I'm starting with three different blanks, blue, white, and kind of a darker blue that looks a little bit more like purple, but that's just in case I need it. Whenever I do a commission, I'll usually hop on a call with the client and try to lock in as much as possible, whether it's the design, orientation, hardware, all of that. And originally the idea for this one was to do a herringbone pattern, which sounds really cool, but it doesn't really work with pencil blocks. I messed around with it a bit, and it was impossible for me to get a seamless, clean look using pencil blocks because it's essentially hundreds of joints making up the pattern, and trying to do that at guitar thickness without gaps just wasn't gonna happen. And then I also run into like structural integrity issues if there's bad joints, so it's just kind of a can of worms trying to pull off a herringbone design. And normally if it's just a personal build, I'll try stuff like that anyways and see what happens, but with a commission I don't really have that luxury, so we pivoted to something else. And for the most part, this client was pretty open, kind of just let me run with the initial design, which sounds nice, but it actually gets a little tricky because when someone's paying for a custom guitar, being on the same page matters a lot more than having full creative freedom. But I've had customers in the past that just want something custom and feed me a little bit of direction and let me run with it. Sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. So for this design, I'm going with sort of a triangular mosaic style layout. Even though I'd like to make these patterns more intricate, I still have to keep the structure of the body in mind, especially through the center where all the string tension is. So this layout keeps things strong enough, but should still come out looking interesting. To create the blank, I've got to glue all these pieces together, and there's a chance I could get away with just gluing one piece to the next, but as a safety measure, I chose to use some wood dowels to secure them in place, which makes the joint a lot stronger, but it also helps align them during lamination. On most pencil builds, at this point in the project, I'd usually run this through the planer to level off the tops of the pencils so that the colored leads are showing, but with this blank, since I've got pencils oriented in different directions, if I were to put this in the planer, it would probably peel out all the white pencil leads, and so because of this, I have to router plane it instead. It takes longer this way, but it pretty much ensures that I won't fling out any of the pencil leads, which would obviously ruin the pattern if that happened, and I'd have to start all over. Gotta scrape the blank now to remove any routing lines and to clean up the pencil wood, because routing them bleeds the lead color into the wood, which on this blank only really happens with the blue leads, so I've got to be careful to stay between the lines here while I'm scraping, and don't scrape from blue to white. Top side of the blank is now good, and I'll put a little foil dam around it and do a flood coat of resin to lock everything in. For the neck on this build, the client wanted a roasted bird's eye maple neck, so that's what I've got here. I've usually got a stack of about 10 or so neck blanks in the shop ranging from bird's eye to flame, white to roasted. Every neck I make is maple for the most part, so it's nice to have these on hand and acclimated to my environment, because especially with neck blanks, if I order them, I've usually got to let them sit for at least a month to let them acclimate to the relative humidity of my shop. Fretboard for this is African ebony, which is overall dark but has some cool colored streaks running through it. Got the fret slots cut out on the table saw using my fret slotting jig, and then that gets glued onto the neck, and at this point, the flood coat on the body is cured so I can get back to working on that. The first step here is getting the opposite side that doesn't have resin on it planed down to the pencil leads, and then I'll scrape it clean and cover it with painter's tape so the colors don't bleed while I'm working on it. Getting the body cut out here on the bandsaw, it's an Explorer style shape, but it's a bit less exaggerated of a shape than like a standard Explorer design. So basically every horn or offset on the body is shrunk a bit. I have to really watch for the body size on these pencil guitars because pencil and glue material is so heavy. So if I make this body larger, it's gonna end up coming out to like 13, maybe even 14 pounds, which is just not a realistic weight for a guitar. I get it routed to shape using a template that I made, and I'll actually use two body templates for this guitar. The one I used here is slightly smaller than the one I'll use later. So here I'm using the larger template as a guide to make a mold for the next and final flood coat, and I'll seal this up with silicone to stop any resin from leaking out. And then I'll carefully drop the body into the mold and pour on the flood coat, which will fill in over the back of the body and the sides. I only take on a few commissions each year, mostly because that's all I've got time for. And usually when someone reaches out, it's for something along the lines of what I've built before, or some variation of it, which makes sense. But if I'm only doing that, I don't really get to push the boundaries on new concepts, which is really the part I enjoy most. And because I don't do that many commissions, I'm constantly reworking my process to figure out the best approach that works for both my client and myself. And every project ends up being a little different, so the process kind of naturally gets tailored to each build. But for every commission I do, I stay in communication throughout, sending progress photos, checking in on key decisions, and getting feedback on specifics. Basically just making sure that we're aligned the whole way through. But at the end of the day, it's not a standard guitar commission where I have like set designs and a list of colors. It's really more of an art commission where every piece is truly a one of one and unique in its own way, which makes it a bit more challenging in some ways. But overall, it's a process in working with a client that I've come to enjoy. The last float coat on the body is now fully cured, and I can use the second template, the larger of the two here, which is the final body size. And so routing this to shape leaves that uniform 1/16 of an inch of resin around the sides of the body. So now every inch of the body is encapsulated, and I can basically just treat this like a normal guitar from this point on. Getting all the pockets routed for the pickup, the neck pocket, electronics, and I can get started on mounting all the hardware. My process for these pencil guitars has evolved a lot over the years. I've already touched on a lot of these changes. Another thing I'll do now on these guitars is use threaded inserts for anything mounting into the body. So for the bridge, it'll get inserts for the cavity cover as well. It just makes things a lot cleaner, and it's more sturdy and reliable than just trying to screw directly into the pencil material. The bridge I'm using is a string through design, so I'm drilling out the string ferrule holes on the back, and I'll open them up a tad with a countersink bit so they'll sit just below the surface. And then I'll wipe it down with a bit of acetone, and it's pretty much good to get clear coated from here. And after that, I've just got to wet sand it, buff it, and get all the parts installed. Got this thing all assembled, and I like the way it came out. I think it looks pretty good. The only issue is that the client doesn't like it. So I've got to figure out